everybody who is as excited as I am to be back with some brand new episodes, some makers coming your way, female, non binary makers, all kinds from all over the world. My name is Katie Freeman, and I am your host every week. I bring you episodes on Wednesdays and Fridays, interviews with makers, female makers, and non binary makers of all kinds of making and crafting and all kinds of things from all over the world. Today's guest is Irene Wei. I'm super excited to bring you this conversation. It's an important conversation. It was super intriguing and interesting. I went into it knowing Irene through woodworking, found out she is also a traditional paper maker as well. And so really dove down deep into that just because it was something that I found really interesting and I thought you guys would as well. And her experience as a Taiwanese American citizen. So excited for that. So excited to be back under the new name of the podcast, Crafting Revolution. And I mean, come on, Ashley Minnie, who's been a guest on the podcast, blew it out of the water with this music that she put together. She wrote the music, she wrote the lyrics, she did it all. Amazing maker, amazing musician. And so thank you so very much, Ashley, for putting this all together so that we can use it going forward. All right, but before we hop into the podcast interview episode with Irene, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. All right, so thank you so much, Katie Thompson of Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Spees, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Sven, Dwarf Size Workshop, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Tool Mom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou, Made by Mary Lou, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your ongoing and continued support, helping me to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. And with no further ado, here is Irene Wei.
Great.
No worries.
My name is Irene Wei. I am a furniture designer. I received my education at the Rhode Island School of Design. When I'm not making furniture, I am working on preserving Taiwanese traditional craft of making pith paper flowers. There's only one paper maker who makes the material for this craft left in Taiwan. And there's only a few people who make the flowers. So something that I've been doing is trying to educate artistic communities about this craft to hopefully continue the knowledge of it. Yeah.
That's super interesting. So it's almost like it's like an endangered species of craft, essentially.
Yeah. It's interesting. So the paper is made from this plant called Tetrapanax papyrifer. In Chinese is called, or Mandarin Chinese is called tōngcǎo. And actually the cultivation of this plant is also kind of waning as well because there isn't a demand for the crafts made from this plant. So it's been kind of sad to see it becoming less valued in the Taiwanese community, but recently there's been a push to revive the crafts associated with it and the cultivation of the plant. Yeah.
Okay. Are you like interested in getting into you said there's only like one person who makes the paper. So are you looking to also learn how to like make the paper or yourself?
Yeah. So I also have a background in traditional paper making, and I have previously been a board member of the Hand Paper Making magazine and have worked for several other traditional papermaking institutions. And that's how I first came to know this material. And I am currently here in Taiwan on a Fulbright Research Fellowship to do more research on the plant and how it's used to make this pith paper for pith flower making. And I'm trying to learn how to make the paper and the flowers right now, because there's a very severe lack of tools to make the flowers and the paper. Something I'm also trying to do is trying to remake a lot of these tools so that way my teachers can continue to share, they can like spread more knowledge about it because they have the tools to be able to do that, right? The tools are pretty, they can get damaged easily. So they don't really, at least on the paper making side of things, the tools for paper making are pretty can be easily damaged. So, so the one remaining pith paper maker actually doesn't teach people how to make it anymore.
Oh, okay. Is there, I mean, besides the flowers, is there anything else that's made from that paper?
Yeah, actually, people use the pith of the tōngcǎo plant for medicine. Actually, it's very interesting. You can boil it, and there's like a recipe for carp soup with tōngcǎo, and it's used as a way to promote lactation in pregnant people. So I thought it was very interesting, and it's also been known to help with diuresis and helping with fevers as well. It's very interesting.
Wow. I really wish I would have known about that when I had little babies. That would have been helpful.
Also, the pith of this plant is a white spongy material, and historically it's actually been used kind of like a styrofoam. It has not ever been used as an alternative to styrofoam because it has historically always been used this way. So I've read texts in Chinese where they've said that they've used it as a life vest material, or like a fishing fly material, or as insulation for homes in like more ancient times.
Yeah, but that's super interesting. Yeah. So I kind of dove right in because I got interested about the paper thing, but I do want to maybe hit pause for a second and ask a broader question of, what's your story from, where were you born? Where'd you grow up to, like, how you got to what you're doing now?
Okay. I was born in Missouri as a child to Taiwanese immigrants, and we eventually moved to Michigan. I grew up in a single parent household, and my mom actually encouraged my affinity for the arts because she herself was an artist. She actually got her degree in painting at the Wenhua Daxue. It's like a university in Taipei, when she was an undergrad, and she actually was supposed to go to RISD for graduate school, but because she couldn't afford it, she wasn't able to go back in the early 80s or something like that. It's very interesting though, because even though we're both interested in the arts, she's very much a 2D person and I'm very much a 3D person. So that's been kind of something we joke about at home. But when I was able to go to the Rhode Island School of Design, it was a really big deal for both of us because it was like very emotional, because for her, she had always dreamt of going, and I was like finally able to go for the both of us, basically. And when I was there, I actually thought I was going to go into sculpture. because I feel like I'm a very tactile person. I really like making things with my hands. But I guess I had not really ever considered furniture before. I guess subconsciously, I just didn't realize I could do that. I didn't like, I didn't think I could do it. But then during one of the studio tours, I saw that one of the professors there was an East Asian woman, Yuri Kobayashi, and I was like, wow, she's so cool and she's so smart and extremely good at woodworking. And I guess just that visual of her being there and doing, excelling at something that I guess society had been telling me, and I had been telling myself because of that, that I couldn't do woodworking. Was just kind of like, oh, that's silly. Why did I ever think that? Like, look at this one, she's doing so great. And so I immediately changed my major over to furniture design, and I really think it was the best decision for myself. Yeah. So
You know,
since then, yes.
she's had an influence
Yeah.
on others. You're not the first to bring up her name, so I think
Yeah.
I think that's excellent, right? It's the representation allows others to see themselves and think, oh, that's something I can do.
Yeah. Um, yeah. That she's like been a big influence in my development as a furniture, development as a furniture designer. But after college, I immediately went into, so I had been keeping up my practice in traditional paper making on this, and I had been working for paper making institutions on the side in addition to my studies in furniture design. And so immediately after college, I went to Taiwan on the RISD Meharem STEAM Fellowship, which is a program that provides funding for some research. And that's when I first came to Taiwan to study tōngcǎo and how it's used for pith paper making and traditional paper flower making. And so while I was there, I documented a lot of people. Actually, it kind of turned into this much bigger project than I thought it was going to be. I actually thought I was just going to learn how to make the paper and learn how to make the flowers, and that was going to be it. But then I ended up talking to wood scientists, conservators, or conservationists, herbalists, and I also talked to farmers and botanists. And it was really interesting to see to learn a lot more about my Taiwanese heritage through this plant and the crafts associated with it. And it also, because I've been learning how to make these flowers, I've also been learning a lot about the flora and fauna of Taiwan. And I think that's been really nice because that was my time going to Taiwan as an adult, or the last time I've been to I went to Taiwan, I was really young, so I don't remember much of my time there. But it's been amazing to not only learn about this rich traditional craft that's so meaningful to my culture, but it's also been a way for me to learn more about other things like the vegetation that exists in Taiwan. And because I hadn't really seen it before in person until 2 years ago. So I was in Taiwan for a few months. And then after that, I came back to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I worked as a woodworking instructor at a maker space there, where I also freelanced and did custom furniture for in the area. And then I did that for a year and a half. And now I'm back in Taiwan, continuing my research on this traditional craft that on through the Fulbright research program. Yeah. So that's
That's
where I'm at right now.
yeah. That's awesome. So I think I want to follow up on, so were you doing, like, had you gotten into paper making before you went into college?
Yeah.
Okay.
I first learned traditional paper making through Andrea Peterson, um, who runs Hook Pottery Paper. I think that's the name of her studio, and that was at Oxbow in Michigan, the
Okay.
Oxbow Artisan Residency Program in Michigan.
Okay. Was that, I mean, what sparked your interest in paper making?
Mm, it actually was very much by accident. Um, I saw an ad through the Oxbow Artists and Residency Program that they were providing free scholarships to high school students, and they could choose any course that they liked. And I was like, oh, paper making sounds interesting. And so I signed up for that class and then realized that I really liked it. It's really nice working with the material. And a lot of people ask me why I continue to do it, because it seems like it's very different from furniture, but I think they're both very tactile fields and I really enjoy working with my hands. So, and also the paper making kind of can, my paper making work can go into my furniture a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
And I found ways to do that. So yeah, it doesn't seem too disconnected to me.
Well, they're both essentially plant based as well, right? I mean, a lot of,
Mhm.
you're working with natural materials for both fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How have you integrated your paper making into the furniture making?
Mm. Yeah, so I've incorporated it aesthetically as just like I've made this coffee table that had and where I encased several layers of paper that I had made, and I don't really know how to describe it, but it's triangular
Mm-hmm.
and there are many layers of paper, so it looks like you're looking into this many paper layered, that's not a good description. It just, I've used it aesthetically within my work, and then
Mm-hmm.
also functionally. I actually spent some time studying the traditional art of paper thread making, um, and specifically the Japanese version of paper thread making
Mm-hmm.
called shifu. And back in the day, Japanese farmers, when they didn't have easy access to cotton during the winters, they would actually take old accounting books and then make paper thread. And apparently, the paper thread garments were warmer than the cotton garments, and it was really durable. Um, and there are some at the Rhode Museum, they actually have a shifu 10, which is like a type of garment that is in really great condition. It was worn by a farmer, I think, like several hundred years ago,
Oh, well.
and farmers like are often moving a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was still in really good condition. So that just kind of showed to me that this is a really great resourceful way to use paper, and it's really a really practical way to use paper. And so I learned how to make this paper thread, and I used it for upholstery on a bench that I made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like you have a huge love for paper making. Do you have, I mean, do you feel like it's like equal between the paper making and the furniture? Or do you think like you'll continue down the path of paper making probably more so than furniture?
Mm, I think it's equal, but there's more funding in my practice as a furniture maker. And so, I mean, sorry, by funding, I mean I can make more money
Mm-hmm.
as a furniture maker than as a paper maker. And so I've been using my career as a furniture maker to support my side career as a traditional paper maker.
Mm-hmm.
But if I could and I had all the money in the world, I would try to even it out a little more. Yeah.
Hey makers. So today's podcast episode is sponsored in part by Alicia Van Osdal, who is the owner of Basil Blue Design Company. Alicia is a maker of all things, really. Her focus is on beautiful craftsmanship through woodworking, repurposing, refinishing, art, and sculpture. Her background includes 30 years of graphic design, logos, and branding. If you have an idea or concept and need a creative solution or graphic design, you can email Alicia directly at Alicia, and that is ALICIA at basilblue.com. Or you can visit her website at www.basilblue.com. And fun fact, Alicia actually designed the logo for Crafting Revolution. So that is an example of the impeccable work you can expect if that is something you are in the market for. So be sure to look up Alicia again at her website, basilblue.com. All right, let's get back into the action. Mm-hmm. Have you, being in Taiwan, has there been any research into like traditional Taiwanese furniture making?
As me personally, have
Yeah.
I done any research in it? Um, I haven't done as much research into Taiwanese furniture making. And I also think that because a lot of Taiwanese culture has evolved from Chinese culture, I think that's a lot of the furniture that you find here can also be found in China
Mm.
because of like the migration of Chinese people to Taiwan at different stages in different time periods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, do you see influence of East Asian work in what you learned in school?
Mm. Um, that's something that I've actually been thinking about recently. In school, we're taught about American design, and what that usually looks like are like Ray Charles Eames, Bertoya, uh, Goddard and Townsend, or the Shakers,
Mm-hmm.
which they're all great, but I think that the American narrative has expanded much beyond that by now. And I think different cultures use furniture very differently. And so I think that we could have more representation of other types of furniture used in different cultures in
Mm-hmm.
our American education, because I think that I relate less to the artists and designers that are taught in school,
Mm-hmm.
especially because in a lot of East Asian cultures, you spend a lot of time lower to the floor, like you kneel at a table,
Mm-hmm.
or so I think different cultures use furniture differently, and because there are so many different types of people who live in America, not just white Americans, I think that there could be more representation of different artists and designers in school
Mm-hmm.
that show how furniture is used differently across cultures in a more respectful way. Um, for example, like in a lot of Asian cultures, a lot of the furniture is lower to the ground because a lot more time is spent lower to the ground. like you kneel at the table, or like even the utensils are different. Like at least in Taiwanese culture, we use chopsticks more than we use forks and spoons and
Right.
knives. I feel like a lot of, like in Western European culture, there's like a specific spoon, knife, and fork for all sorts of different types
Right.
of food.
Right.
And so, like, just I think that I think that for me, it's been interesting. I felt like even just through, because we live with this furniture and we grew up with it, and that's when I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you're only taught about one type of culture's uh, like design,
Yeah.
it definitely makes you, it kind of excludes other people who consider themselves American but come from a different cultural background or a different ethnic background. Um,
Yeah.
but in the ways that I have seen East Asian designs used at school, it has often been used in a, trying to find a nicer word, but in a
Hey,
kind of,
I'm gonna tell you, you don't have to be nice on this podcast. You can say you can say how you feel about it.
okay, well, I feel like it's been used in often very tactless ways, because I think a lot of white Americans really appreciate um, the aesthetic of East Asian designs, but oftentimes I see people using like Chinese, Japanese design motifs in their work, but they have no idea what these like symbols or designs
Mhm.
resemble in their respective cultures. And I've seen some things where it's just very uh, it exploits the culture. Some people take less issue with this than I do, but I do think that I think it's just interesting because I think that when I've used when I've referenced East Asian design, specifically Taiwanese and my Taiwanese and Chinese, uh, like Chinese heritage, excuse me, when I've used when I've referenced Chinese and Taiwanese designs, I feel like it's just kind of like, whatever, yeah, of course the Asian girl is going to do that. But then when my white colleagues or classmates use or reference
Mhm.
designs that they don't even know anything about, they're kind of held in a much higher light than me. I was actually exhibiting at the Philadelphia Furniture Show a couple of years ago, and I was there because I was one of the emerging artist recipients. And some guy came up to me and he actually said, "You and your work don't really fit in here. Like, why are you here?" And it was just kind of like, like, you are using East Asian designs in your own work. And so how is it that my work doesn't belong here? I mean, to be fair, my work was a lot more colorful than a lot of the work
Mhm.
that was there, and it definitely stuck out quite a bit more. But I mean,
But
I just,
I think that should be celebrated, not not dismissed or put down. Um,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I want to ask, like, so in your own home growing up, the furniture that you were surrounded with, did it reflect your um, East Asian heritage, or was it, you know, European? I mean, because that's, to your point, that's what's taught in our schools is basically European furniture, European based furniture, which, if you do much diving, you can find was stolen from very different aspects were stolen from many different cultures and then claimed as
Mhm.
European. But I'm just curious, like in your own space, like were you able to see reflected your own East Asian heritage?
Mm, actually, not really, because when I was younger, I grew up in a low income household, and we actually lived amongst a lot of university students. And so we would just pick up furniture that they would throw away and then
Mm-hmm.
use that in our household. And so our house never looked very cohesive furniture wise, but it was all very practical, so whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just interesting being uh, a kid of diaspora, because as I told you, I went to Taiwan for the first time as like a cognizant adult about 2 years ago, and it was my first time completely being immersed in this culture. And before that, I felt so disconnected because the objects around me didn't resemble my culture, or my ethnic background at least. And I was seen as other because of the way I looked. And I also couldn't speak the language very well, like Chinese or Taiwanese. Um, Sorry, I got
No.
distracted by your cat.
Yeah, sorry.
Um, uh, and so it was really special to be in Taiwan for me, mostly because I got to see the real deal, not
Mm-hmm.
what white people have interpreted uh, as Asian design.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really special to me. And I got to experience the culture for the first time, not just through my mom. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a emotional experience and a, a feeling of belonging. Um, do you feel ever out of place in Taiwan because you grew up in the US? Does that ever feel make you feel out of place there?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it all the time. It's interesting because in the US, I have always felt like a foreigner there, but I was
Mm-hmm.
born there and I belong there more than I belong here in Taiwan, because I didn't grow up here and I didn't grow up immersed in this culture. I feel like there's a lot of catching up I'd like to be able to do so I could learn more about Taiwanese culture. It's also interesting because in Taiwan, I don't think I'll ever be, uh, I'll never be considered an actual Taiwanese person. I'll always be considered someone of Taiwanese descent, but lives in America.
Mm-hmm. I've heard,
And so that's a little bit sad for me. Yeah.
yeah, and I've heard from others, maybe with a similar story of this feeling of maybe, to put in your words, like being from two different worlds almost and feeling like never quite American enough and never quite Taiwanese enough. And this,
Yeah.
the dichotomy of being able to live in both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was growing up, even among like the Taiwanese community that existed where I lived, I was considered too American to hang out with them. And then for, at least in school, which was the school that I went to was predominantly white, they were like, oh, you're not white, so you can't hang out with us either. So it definitely feels like a weird in between. It's like, and feels like I don't really belong anywhere. But I think more recently, within the last couple of years, I feel like I've developed a community of people who are similar to me, where we're like third culture kids, where we are kind of stuck in this in between, and it's been really nice to have this community of people who are just as confused as I am, or struggling just as much, or also celebrating the fact that we exist in this interesting in between space. But I also feel like object making is very important to me because of this, especially through making Taiwanese pith paper flowers, or incorporating elements of Chinese and Taiwanese design into my furniture work. Because I think object making is a tangible way for me to reconnect to my cultural heritage.
And I would think to just connect with yourself. Like, I feel like,
yeah,
I mean, even just in the fact of like your integrating of your paper making into your furniture making, you're resembling the in between. Like, you're making a physical form of that feeling of in between.
Yeah, I guess so.
So do you get a chance to do both when you're in Taiwan? Like, do you have access to like space to make, or is there only access to the paper making when you're in Taiwan?
So right now I only have access to making pith flowers, mostly because Taiwan is going under a
the lockdown.
Or soft lockdown
Yeah.
because of COVID. But before the lockdown, which was about 2 weeks ago, I found this maker space that I could buy a membership for, and so I could make furniture. And I was thinking about finding ways to incorporate my pith flower making into my furniture making.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodworker on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
But right now I can't do that anymore because I'm not supposed to be going out except for going to the grocery store or something like that.
Do you still work on design though, as in creating new work, at least sketch-wise?
Yeah, I've been designing some furniture that I want to make on Rhino. We'll see when I actually get to make it. But I was going to make these tables and then have these pockets in the middle of the table to put my pith flowers in, and then cover them with glass so that way you could see them as a centerpiece that's built into the table. But yeah, right now I'm not able to make it. And so hopefully hopefully when this blows over or when I'm back in the US and I find a space to make it, I can actually make it.
Yeah. Can you make the pith flowers in the US? Like, do you have access to the materials and everything in the US?
Yeah, so I bought a lot of the materials from my teacher and brought them back to the US last time, and I'm probably going to do that again. And I've also been working with my teacher to recreate a lot of the tools. So I have been remodeling them on CAD. And I'm hoping to do some casts of 3D print them and then cast them, and then maybe do some wax casting so I can get them brass casted.
What's the I mean, you mentioned that the tools like wear easily or break easily. So what are they like made from, the tools that you use to make the flowers?
Okay, so to make the pith paper, you need this gigantic knife. It's about 1.5 feet long.
Oh, wow.
And the blade is about 8 inches wide. But when it wears down, it kind of changes in thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right? Yeah, thickness. I've seen some that were originally like 6 to 8 inches wide that are now 4 inches wide.
Okay.
But there aren't, because this tool is actually, even though it's a knife, and people think, oh, I can remake that, there actually are some specific angles and weights that you have to get with this knife that makes it much more specialized than a regular knife. And there aren't people in Taiwan that make it anymore. Supposedly, there are some people who still make a variation of this knife in China, and supposedly there are some pith paper makers left in China, but I am unable to go there right now. Not only because of COVID, but because of political tensions between the US and China.
Right.
But originally that was supposed to be part of my Fulbright research plan, was to spend 60 days in mainland China to go look for these craftspeople.
Okay.
And then for the flower making, there are some specific tools that are used for petal making and leaf making, but there aren't people who make those tools anymore. And because this material, so pith paper is actually very different from regular paper, and technically it's not actually a paper, it's a material that functions like paper. But when you look under the microscope, look at paper, actual paper under a microscope versus pith paper under a microscope, pith paper has like a parenchyma cell structure, which is like a honeycomb shape.
Yep.
And paper, regular paper, is macerated plant fiber that is felted together and pressed. So it looks like a lot of interwoven fibers.
Yeah, it's much more like fiber is the word, but it's like a pulp, right? I mean, regular like standard paper making starts with a pulp. Does with the pith, do you create a pulp with that as well, or is it, since it's honeycomb structure, a completely different process?
It's a completely different process. So the way you make this paper is, first you have to get the plant, tōngcǎo, and inside the plant there is a spongy inner white pith, and you have to extract that pith. Once you extract the pith, it's like this white spongy pith rod, and you cut them into sections, into manageable lengths, and then you pare it spirally, so kind of like how wood veneer is made. And so it's a completely different process, and therefore it also acts very differently to paper. people still paint on it, but the pith paper reacts differently when water touches it. And so the tools are very specific to this type of paper. So there are paper flower makers in the world who've already created these tools, but they only work for paper, like actual paper,
Yeah,
not
right.
paper.
Gotcha. So, like you said, I mean, with the new technologies of like 3D printing and stuff like that, is it possible to get those tools, scan them for the pith paper, scan them, print them, and cast them?
Yeah, actually, so my teacher actually has been making them by hand, each one by hand, and then selling them to his students. But we've been working on creating a version on CAD that we could maybe do some batch production with, and that would make his life a lot easier.
Right.
And then also we'd be able to give out these tools to more people than if he makes them by hand one by one. But it's interesting because he uses, there are these wooden massage tools that you can find at various street vendors in Taiwan, and he's been using those and then modifying them to work for flower making. And it actually works really well. So we're kind of modeling it after those wooden massage tools, but then adding the actual, like creating it to be more functional for the flower making.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, again, you can't go to China necessarily find the artisans, but right now, does it feel like when he's gone, the craft is gone?
No, I don't think so, because he's done a really great job at teaching people. So there are only a few pith paper flower makers, like master flower makers. But my teacher has been teaching so many classes all around Taiwan, and then has taught people who have become good enough to become teachers. So they have been teaching a bunch of classes. So the pith paper flower making is starting to become more known around Taiwan. However, the pith paper making, the issue is the pith paper. Because there's only one pith paper maker. She's the pith paper maker. They're very reliant on her for the pith paper. And so once she is gone, then there will be a lot of issues amongst the pith paper craft community, I think. So that's why my teacher and I have been kind of working together to try to recreate these tools and trying to find knife makers who can help us recreate these tools. He's already kind of given them a few tries. He's brought his designs to a knife maker, try to remake the tool. But so far these attempts have been unsuccessful because, again, it's not like a regular knife. They're very specific measurements and weights that this knife needs to have in order to make it functional for pith paper making.
Do you think that's something that you would be able to like scan and cast?
I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the process of knife making, but I don't think this is something that I could just cast and scan and cast. I think that I need to send it to someone who specializes in knife making and can have a better sense of how to make it functional for pith paper making.
When, how long is your time there going to be now? Like, how long is your research time?
So I'm supposed to be here until the end of December, so about 9 months total. but because of COVID, right now everything is on pause, and I'm not even sure if I can do a lot of the field work I had planned. Because a lot of the field work I was going to do, I was going to go up into the mountains and look for the plant and learn more about the cultivation of this plant with the indigenous farmers. But now all of that's been canceled. And so now I've just been at home translating historical texts and reading and writing about the history. And I've also been practicing making pith flowers because I'm trying to get I'm trying to get a lot better. I'm trying to learn many different types of flowers and expand my techniques in pith flower making.
Do you have hopes of being able to teach people in the US how to do it?
Yeah, actually, so I taught my first class through a workshop of our own, and that was really cool. It was a virtual workshop, and I created 50 different kits to make pith paper morning glories, and that was super fun. Even though it was virtual, it was really fun to talk to people about the history of this craft and why it's important to me. And it seemed like the students were really engaged and having a lot of fun making them. So yeah. And I actually was supposed to teach a few workshops at RISD and in the Providence community right at the start of the pandemic in 2020. But I was driving from Michigan to Providence, and by the time I got to Providence, my workshops had been canceled. So that was pretty sad. But
yeah. I'm paying attention to the time. So we're kind of towards the end of our time together, but I want to give you a chance to let people know, where can they find you? Where can they find your work? So they can kind of keep track of this journey of paper making and woodworking.
So I have 2 Instagram accounts. One is Irene.Ling.Wei, and Ling is spelled Lin. And then my other handle is pith.flower.shop. So that's where you can find my work. So I founded Pith Flower Shop, which is an online shop that educates people about Taiwanese pith flower making, and you can also order custom-made flowers. Because I'm in Taiwan right now, I'm not doing international shipping, so I won't be doing any commissions until the end of December. Yeah,
understandable. Okay, and I will include the links for both of those accounts so people can check that out and find you. And I just want to thank you for taking the time, especially since it's really late where you are. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate seeing your work online and really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about my work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So again, that was Irene Wei back, the first guest back with the podcast with brand new episodes and under the new name of Crafting Revolution. Great interview with her. I'll include the links on how you can follow along with her in the show notes. And so you can find those just in the description for the episode under whatever podcast app you use. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, just look for the description down below to find the links there. So you can follow along with her paper making and her woodworking, and the combination of those two over there. If you're enjoying this podcast, and especially if you're loving the new name and sound of the podcast, please head on over to Patreon and become a supporter over there, helping again to produce 2 episodes a week every week. The best way to find that is through the link in my bio over at Crafting a Revolution on Instagram. So that's just at Crafting a Revolution, all spelled out, all put together, pretty easy. There's also links in that bio to listen on Apple and Spotify and to watch on YouTube, trying to make it a hub for everybody to be able to go to. All right, so when I am not busy changing the name of my podcast and interviewing guests, awesome guests, you can find me designing and making furniture, art, home decor over at freemanfurnishings.com or at Freeman Furnishings pretty much across all the social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. I'm active on a daily basis though on Instagram and TikTok. That's where you can see what projects I am currently up to in the shop. And moving forward, at least for the next probably 6 weeks, you'll get to see the process of moving shop spaces and all that goes into it while also trying to work on a commission project. So it's going to be a hectic 6 weeks, but I am definitely pumped and looking forward to it. All right, so it is Friday. It is Friday, a 4th of July weekend for those of you here in the States. I hope that everybody has a safe and happy 4th of July, and I will see you all next Wednesday with another brand new episode.